We got one more guest, one more segment for this Thursday edition of Bang the Book Radio. That is with Tony George, professional handicapper over at Doc Sports. Today, man.
Let me get me a speaker here, Adam. I'm busy. Mo Valley tournament kicked off today, and that's one of my specialties. So busy with that, the NBA, and just trying to keep myself down in the foxhole. There's a lot of misfired missiles going on right now in college basketball. If you're looking at the results, it's just carnage everywhere for a lot of people. So we're trying to navigate the landscape that is college basketball and looking forward to kind of getting everything in the postseason where it's a little, in my opinion, just a little bit easier to handicap in the regular season, which is completely unpredictable right now.
Before we talk about the Missouri Valley, and that does start tonight at 7 with Valparaiso and Indiana State, I just want to ask you, in general, when it comes to conference tournaments, Tony, are you playing the futures market and playing those teams with the odds to win the conference tournament, or are you just looking, to take advantage of spot plays and things like that sort on a day-to-day basis?
Spot plays, futures right now are again, completely unpredictable. I'm not a defeatist, Adam, but I accept reality, and this is one of those years where you just don't know from day to day, let alone trying to stick it out on the futures. You don't know. You've got, in my opinion, 3 teams, at least maybe 4 in most of the majors conferences that can win the conference tournament. You're talking Big 10, Big 12, Big East, ACC, and then you have to worry about the powerhouse teams. Duke's kind of fallen from grace a little bit. How much energy is Kentucky going to put into the SEC tournament when they got their eye on the big prize, that sort of thing. So they're in the same thing in the Big 12. Every night you're trying to figure out who's going to show up. I mean, you want to bet teams on the futures. Right now, I think it's risky at best. Even in some of the small there's 3 or 4. There's 3 teams that can win the Mountain West this year. I mean, there's a couple. I think a couple in the Mo Valley. It's either Drake or Loyola. But either one of those guys getting upset by a lower-seeded team in the semis wouldn't surprise me either. It's just one of those years. So I'm looking to spot play only and figure out what's going on. Last night was a perfect example, Adam. I did this on my YouTube video I do every day. If you looked at the Ken Palm ratings last night, you saw the game last night that was played in West Virginia. West Virginia was -10 on an overlay on a spread and won outright by double digits against Iowa State. I mean, usually if you have a power rating difference of 8 or 6 or 7 points, it's an amazing. That's an amazing spread. That's separation between the line and a power rating. And last night you had 10 points, even if you shaved off 2 points for home court, which West Virginia sucked all year. You had an 8-point overlay against the spread. 9 times out of 10, that's a game of the year scenario, and they got beat straight up. I mean, those are the type of things right now that are going on in college basketball that, quite frankly, and I know you look at it every day too, that has me still scratching my head as we're entering March Madness. Usually during the season, 10 or 15 games in, that team's who I think they are, And you kind of get them figured out. It's going right down to the wire here, and sometimes you see these results and you got to scratch your head and ask yourself, is there that much parity, or am I handicapping wrong, or is it just one of those years? I think it's one of those years. I don't think it's safe to be throwing around a bunch of futures bets.
The last night was kind of a rough one for a lot of people, it seemed. I mean, Marquette collapsed late, and it was a disastrous end to that game for them. Ohio State getting beat by 18 at Northwestern in a game that was essentially a coin flip. North Carolina State losing at home to Georgia Tech, which may knock NC State off the bubble. It was definitely one of those nights. It feels like it's been one of those months already. And the madness of March hasn't even really fully started yet.
Oh, and the biggest, there was a lot of services that liked Marquette yesterday. I liked them, but it didn't pass the smell test. And a lot of times this time of season, what you have in front of you is exactly what you have in front of you. And sometimes you could take all the, and, you know, guys like me and you, we're watching games all the time. All the time. I'm watching reruns. I'm DVRing games. I'm not, because I can't watch them all. And then I'll watch them till 1 or 2 in the morning. You know, and you know, it's just one of those and it's that time of year where sometimes it's just the eye test. You just watch a game and watch a team's body language, watch how a guy coaches, and, you know, you just wonder about the eye test. And one of the eye tests was, for me, Iowa State. They have not played that well down the stretch. Offensively, they have had problems putting it together. They've had problems closing games late. We all know about Hilton Magic and trying to beat them in Ames and all this, that, and the other. But West Virginia is I never thought I'd say this, and Bob Huggins' team's dead last in the Big 12. They suck. And to go on the road with Iowa State with the conference tournament seeding on the line, with a 10-point overlay. I mean, you measure power ratings against the spread, Adam, for, you know, your articles to try and to gain an edge on the line. You just don't see 10-point spread overlays. And then to turn around and get beat by double digits, you know. I mean, this is the type of year that we're going to have. And I guess the best free tip anybody's going to get on your podcast today is low volume. If you start spreading it around and laying a bunch of big numbers this time of year, you are going to get your ass handed to you, because there's just that. And they always say, and I'll get your feedback on this statement, but they always say, oh, these handicappers, when they're not having a winning season, they cry parity. You know, that's their cop-out. That's their excuse. It's not an excuse, Adam. In my opinion, it is a fact.
No, I agree. I mean, the talent pool is just, it's so spread out across really all of these conferences. I mean, and also, too, I think something that's kind of stood out a little bit here this year in some of the low majors is that you've got some really, really good freshmen, like Antoine Davis at Detroit, like the Pickett kid at Siena. You've got some freshmen that are really transforming programs that aren't particularly good, but these players are so good, they make their teams dangerous in underdog roles or, you know, something to that effect. So I don't remember seeing it like that. But, you know, again, I mean, these kids come to college so prepared for the bright lights and the spotlights that, you know, I mean, I guess it does make sense.
Well, in the early 80s, I got recruited by 5'11", 192 pounds. Free safety. You know, I'm telling you right now, in this day and age, I wouldn't get a sniff. Wouldn't even – I'd be lucky to get on and also ran at a Division II school, which is where I ended up playing for a couple, you know, in my college days. But at the end of the day, the athlete is so prepared nowadays. There's so many of these select camps and select teams. And anymore, you know, I come from a small town in Nebraska, 4,000 people. And, you know, so I played I did football, then I went into basketball, and on football you played on both sides of the ball, you know, and then I played golf. I was a golfer. Yeah, I still am, but I played golf in high school. And the bottom line is, nowadays you'll find athletes that pick one sport and one sport only, and they just play that sport and train for that sport. You know, 12 months a year, personal trainers, nutritionalists, select teams, the best coaches in the business, mom and dad spending huge bucks, you know, to make sure their kid can make the team and compete at a high level, you know, all-star games all over the country. And you're right, these athletes come into college now. I mean, I'll sit here and watch a game with my wife, and my wife will look at me and she goes, that guy is 19 years old? He looks like he's 30. I mean, they're just built. I don't know what they put in the water, Adam. Maybe it changed his testosterone since you and I were in high school and college.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just crazy to look at some of these kids in both, you know, college basketball and college football. But let's talk about the Missouri Valley Conference, and we'll get your thoughts on the Big 12 next week, because the Big 12 starts on Wednesday. We'll have you on Tuesday's show. As I mentioned, you know, shows Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday only next week, and the following week, the first week of March Madness. But the Missouri Valley here, Loyola Chicago, your top seed, plus 170. Drake is the number 2 seed, and they're plus 600. Their price has been dropping throughout the week. Southern Illinois, plus 350. Missouri State, plus 700. Bradley, 900. 1,200 on down from there, but nobody a longer shot here than 50-1 to win Arch Madness. So this is a very wide open field. Loyola is the best team, but nobody's going to be surprised if they don't get this auto bid.
Yeah. The one thing that you mentioned all those, I guess the one thing that really gives Loyola a leg up, in my opinion, is just experience. They were here last year. They won it. They ran deep into the tournament. They've got basically some of the core of that team back, same coach. Now, you talk about young players coming in and making impacts. Drake is well, number one, Drake's one of the top 2 cover teams in college basketball for starters. Second of all, Drake probably would have been the leader in this conference and probably odds-on favorite to win it in Arch Madness here in St. Louis. But they lost Nick Norton in January, and he was a stud on their team, and they've been able to recover. They have a very young team. Their coach was an assistant coach under Marshall at Wichita State and came over. This is one of the youngest teams in the Mo Valley tournament. So I worry about their youth in this tournament, and I worry about actually the head coaching, because this is the first time this coach has taken this team down to St. Louis. He's going up against some veteran squads and some veteran coaches that have been around, this landscape down there in St. Louis. The tournament is a cavern. It played in a big, a big arena. It's not a cavern like a lot of these. You're not playing Bradley at the barn and this, that, and the other. These venues, a lot of these schools have, hold 6,000 or 7,000 people. So there's a lot of different things going on perspective-wise in this tournament. And I'll tell you, I think outside of Loyola and Drake, again, they're just a shit ton of I know this is a family show. Sorry about that. There's just a ton of parity in this tournament, and really anybody can beat anybody, tonight. The early game, from a free play perspective, I've got a premium play on the Evansville, Illinois State game tonight. I've only lost 3 games in this tournament in the last 2 years, Adam, and the year before that I went undefeated. So 3 games in 3 years I've lost in this tournament. And but that Valpo-Evansville game here tonight, I don't know if you've seen the news, but Evansville dismissed their 3rd leading scorer and top rebounder from the team Wednesday. He's gone. And that's going to be a huge blow to them tonight. That's Evansville. So against that Illinois State game. And then, of course, the Valpo game, I don't, the storyline, that's the storyline on the late game. The early game is Valpo can't score any points at them. 58 points per game their last 5. Dropped their last 3 games. 0 and 3 straight up and against the spread. And the thing that you take a look at Valpo, 58 points per game their last 5, shooting 21% from 3-point range in their last. They can't score. They're catching 3 tonight. But the interesting thing about that game there is the total sitting at 126 and a half. Valpo's had 29 games this year, Adam. They went under in 20 of them. And it's not like Indiana State is an offensive juggernaut either. They're only scoring 66 a game their last 5. And, of course, both teams allowing right at 66. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of offensive fireworks in the first tournament game in the Mo Valley tournament tonight between those 2 teams. I'd really take a serious look at that lean on that under. I'd be surprised if either team got out of the 60s at all.
Yeah, this is a fantastic conference tournament for under bettors. A lot of people tend to know that, but in fact, I haven't seen, we've seen some of these games move down a little bit. We haven't seen them move down to the degree that they have in the past. But, what about, this is a tournament you have followed very, very closely. Outside of looking at the under and kind of starting with that position and having to find a reason to talk yourself out of it, what else is a betting angle that you look for here in this conference tournament?
Well, the one thing I always look at here is the records of these teams, and the seeding based on what they've done on the road. And it's interesting because there is only one team in this entire conference that has a winning road record, and that's Drake. I mean, and then you look at neutral floor. Not only is Drake have the only winning road record. And by the way, they were 13-2 at home. They're 21-6 against the spread with 2 pushes. They also, early in the season, when you get to neutral floors, once covered 70, they won 75. They went 3-1, won 75% of their games on neutral floor, and them and Illinois State and Indiana State are the only 3 teams in that conference that have a winning record on a neutral floor. So I take a look at these angles a little bit on neutral floor and how teams performed on the road. You know, Illinois State and Evansville had 2 wins on the road the entire season. So I kind of look at the home-road dichotomies there a little bit. And, you know, neutral floor is a little different, but at the end of the day, that's an angle I look at there. So, and I'll tell you what, you know, at the end of the day, you know, I think it's a coin flip between Drake and Loyola Chicago. I really do. I think it's going to be a very, very if we can get those 2 down, you've got in the finals, it's going to be a hell of a game. You've got Loyola going to take on the winner of Valpo and Indy State. So they're going to be a big favorite on Friday. And that game's like at noon Eastern tomorrow. So that line will be out early, but probably get Loyola under 10 might be worth a look there. And then, of course, you've got Drake taking on the winner of Illinois State, Evansville. And Illinois State might be a team here that you want to keep a look at, you know, in terms of being a dark horse in this tournament, you know, just because of the talent they have. They just can't – they had a better coach. They'd probably be in, the top 3 in this tournament, more so than most state, simply because they've got a player on the first team, the player on the second team, and a player on the third team, all-conference team at the end of the season, not to mention number 1 selection, first-team all-Frosh team here. They just can't seem to close games out late, but they might be able to advance here against Evansville. I think they can. I think they might make some noise there. They might give Drake some. They might give Drake some trouble in that game. So it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out tomorrow.
You know, that's something we haven't talked about yet this week, but I'm glad you brought up coaching, because one of the things about this conference tournament format is you play back-to-back days, or, you know, obviously you can play 3 games in 3 days, 4 games in 4 days. You don't have time to incorporate things in practice from scouting the opposition. You just have to get your team to buy in immediately without going through it in practice. Now, of course, you did during the regular season, but that's something that really matters here at this time of the year is, you know, coaching may matter even more because of the quick turnaround time and trying to get your team prepared.
Yeah, I like this coach at Drake. I mean, you know, they really, you know, they had Drake was in second place. Mo State was in third place in this conference, and they went down there on Saturday or Sunday. I don't remember what day it was this weekend. They went down there as a 4.5-point road favorite to Mo State and won by 11. Now, to try and win a Mo Valley conference title, they ended up tying with Loyola for the regular season title. And as I stated earlier, what this guy has done with this team has been unbelievable. Now you take all those positives, and now you're wiping the slate clean, proving once again that postseason handicapping is different than regular season handicapping, because you have a whole new set of dynamics and a whole new set of variables, because you have a young team that's never been down here for the most part, maybe a couple of them, but not any huge impact players that Drake has. You have a very young team, and that hasn't been in this size of arena and this stage. Even when Drake won those early season neutral site games, those were down in the Bahamas. They went down there and they won a tournament, and, you know, that stadium down there seats like 3,500 people. So it wasn't like they were in Madison Square Garden on a neutral floor playing in a huge tournament at the beginning of the season. But this coach has done a good job, but now you have a young team there and you have a coach. This is his first experience in St. Louis in Arch Madness. So that kind of neutralizes some of the momentum they've had. But still, you know, if I'm going to play a futures bet in this conference, I'll probably lean towards Drake, not Loyola, to win this tournament, just as kind of a long shot at them. I just think they have the best coaching right now of anybody in that conference, and they're way under the radar. So just look at them. They're the number one cover team in college basketball, Adam. That's for a reason.
All right, so we'll wrap up this segment here with Tony talking about the NBA a little bit. And, we've talked about your first half betting, and we've talked about how you use situational spots to your advantage, and you've done a phenomenal job of doing that this year, having a very good year in the association. It's not all situational, right? There are some stats that you do incorporate into the process, correct?
Yeah, there is, but it's still scheduling more than anything else. And right now, as I mentioned, it seems primitive, but it's still the eye test. It really is. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I mean, I look at stats, and if you're looking at season-long stats handicapping the NBA, then quit handicapping the NBA and just hire me full-time. Or Brad Powers or whoever else you have on the show. We're experts. You handicap the last 5 game stats. Teams get in cycles. Now you have situations where you have some of the most elite teams in the NBA that are just basically put themselves on cruise control because they know they're in the playoffs. Example, Golden State. Okay? Milwaukee the other night getting upended by Phoenix as a 12-point favorite, getting beat by double digits, taking nights off. Where now you're looking at teams that are anywhere from the 5th or 6th spot in the playoff race down to about the 10th or 11th spot in the playoff race, and you're seeing these teams, not the upper echelon teams, but the middle of the pack teams, especially hovering around that 8th playoff spot, 2 or 3 spots out, up or down on the cutoff line, that are really bringing their A game on a nightly basis, and you're able to find some opportunity with them. But at the end of the day, the eye test, last night, Denver. I slept last night. I had Denver and I had Phoenix. Obviously, the eye test for the New York Knicks is simple. They suck. They can't win on the road. They don't have any chemistry. They're poorly coached. They're talent depleted. And you have Phoenix has been surging. They beat the Lakers. They beat the Bucks. The Devin Booker is a stud. They got it's a young team. They haven't. The eye test is Phoenix does not throw in the towel. They play hard. And they have a couple of players that can really light it up. So we covered them. And same thing with Denver. Denver's a team you better watch out for in the West. They are, quote unquote, a team. They have a team concept. And they're buying into this team concept versus L.A. You know what the eye test is on them? LeBron doesn't score 30 points. They don't even compete. He had 31 last night. They still didn't break 100. And I don't care whether he passed MJ and his record and all that last night. The eye test for them is you had a team that has a team concept versus a team that is completely dysfunctional. That Luke Walton has lost a team. LeBron James is all that stuff that's going on internally with that team, and you got one of the best teams in the West. It's a game and a half out of first place, and they want first place. That was laying 5 points, and I think it was an easy call on both those games. But at the end of the day, you look at those stats, you look at those percentages, you start taking a look at bench points. Teams that go to their bench a lot and get a lot of bench points, especially when they're catching more than 5 or 6 points. They're worth a look, and it still boils down, if you're not handicapping the schedule, Adam, you're done. NBA is all about looking at that schedule. How many road games in a day have they been on? How many road games in the last 7 days have they played? This, that, and the other. This team's off a long road trip, and now they're home for the first time. They did fairly well, on the road, and now they're at home against a team that's on their 4th or 5th game. You can find those situational spots. But again, there might be only 1 or 2 a day. That's when you limit your betting to low volume. We're up 97 units. $100 player is up $7,630 this year with my NBA program. And I have acquired, that's all documented over at Docs. It's all transparent. You can go over there and see it. The reason I say I'm not bragging, I was able to do that pretty much betting 1 game a day, Adam. That's all I bet. I keep the volume low, and we just keep plugging away. And, that's slow and steady wins the race in the NBA.
Well, and it's kind of what we talked about, really over the last 2 weeks. College basketball, there is a lot of parity. There is a wide swath of talent across most of these conferences, and you really have to dig deep into these handicaps. And the NBA, It just seems like you just kind of keep it simple, and if it waddles like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's an NBA winner.
Yeah, it's again, it's the eye test. You need to look at little things. You wonder this time of year about effort. You see people giving up a little bit, meaning that they're not bringing a lot of intensity, and you're only going to realize that by watching these games. Teams that don't rebound hard, teams that have a rebounding edge have a distinct advantage in the NBA, because remember, they're getting those rebounds inside of the paint, and everything, and I mean everything in the NBA is played above the rim. Everything. Teams like Detroit, who's coming on strong right now, there's a team that's on a roll. Drummond is very hard to stop in the paint. You got Griffin. You got some other role players there. And there's a team that doesn't, even Blake Griffin's not having the superstar year this year. Only had 9 points last night, for crying out loud, in a big win they had. But, at the end of the day, their team is kind of buying into the team concept. They realize what their weaknesses are, and they play to their strengths, and they try and limit their weaknesses. And if you watch them in the paint, they get a ton of boards at them, and when they do, that's easy putback points because it's above the rim, and anybody catching those rebounds is 6'8" or bigger. And if they're adding some extra effort inside the paint where teams that don't want to, you're finding advantages with teams like that as well.
Tony George, professional handicapper over at Doc Sports. What's going on over there right now, Tony?
Well, tonight we got a limited card on TNT. We're on a 40-22 run in the NBA. And, of course, we got a play tonight in the Thunder and Blazers game and a couple of key angles in that one. And then we open up Bow Valley action tonight with a late game and also a small selection on a doubleheader with an AAC game as well. And, of course, let's not forget NASCAR 4-1 this year. I got a NASCAR handicapper. He's doing Sunday cards, and we're 4-1 and almost up $1,000 this year in NASCAR. All that can be found over at DocSports.com. Not to mention baseball's on sale, Adam. You know what? 144 units last year to the good in baseball. Had a great season, as you know. And we've got $150 off our season passes. Takes you all the way through the World Series over there. Little early bird discounts. Just get over to Docs, check it out, or check me out daily over at YouTube as well with my videos.
And, of course, you can follow Tony on Twitter at TGeorgeSports. Tony George, professional handicapper over at Doc Sports. Appreciate the time, as always, man. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again next Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesday, early next week. We'll talk some Big 12 tourney stuff.